27 Chief of Army Staff Lieutenant General Gen Lagbaja dies after a brief illness at 56. The presidency confirmed his death a day after his successor was promoted and decorated by the president. Donald Trump wins Wisconsin, automatically crossing the 270 mark, now standing at 277 electoral college votes to make him the 47th president of the United States of America. A senior advocate of Nigeria, Bonluwa Adegboruwa, says federal government trying to save face from embarrassment following the arrest, detention, and release of minors and others who were apprehended during the End Bad Governance protests in August. Welcome to the program. I'm Jeffrey Uzono. Here we track what's been happening in the polity. Today we're going to track both what's going on in Nigeria and around the world, but we'll set out on a rather solemn note following the announcement by the presidency of the death of Lieutenant General Taoreed Abiodun Lagbaja, the Chief of Army Staff, at the age of 56. Lieutenant Lagbaja passed away on Tuesday night in Lagos after a period of illness, and that's according to a statement by the president's spokesperson, Bayo Nanuga. Lieutenant General Lagbaja was appointed Chief of Army Staff on June the 19th, 2023 by President Bola Tinubu after an illustrious and distinguished military career which began when he enrolled in the Nigerian Defense Academy in 1987. He played pivotal roles in numerous international security operations, including Operation Zaki in Benue State, Lafayette Dole in Borno, Uduka in southeast Nigeria, and Operation Forest Sanity across Kaduna and Niger states. He was survived by his beloved wife, Maria, and their 2 children. President Tinubu expressed his heartfelt condolences to the family and the Nigerian Armed Forces during this difficult time and wished the Lieutenant General Lagbaja eternal peace. Our thoughts and our prayers are with the family of the late Lieutenant General Taoreed Lagbaja. Let's head outside our shores now. As the results of the presidential election in the United States continue to trickle in, and with the latest from Wisconsin, a battleground state with 10 electoral college votes, Donald Trump is apparently back to the White House after scoring 277 electoral college votes, crossing the 270 benchmark to emerge as victor. The 78-year-old Republican nominee has picked up battleground states of Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and the latest Wisconsin, extending his lead of electoral college vote, leaving Kamala Harris with only a narrow path to victory, and now it's a sealed deal. A return to the White House will be an extraordinary one, or is an extraordinary one comeback for Donald Trump after a loss to Joe Biden in 2020. As world leaders, including President Bola Tinubu, Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu, India's Narendra Modi, UK's Keir Starmer, Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, among others, have congratulated him. Donald Trump spoke earlier in Florida, where he claimed victory amidst cheers from supporters. Let's take a listen.
Well, I want to thank you all very much. This is great. These are our friends. We have thousands of friends in this incredible movement. This was a movement like nobody's ever seen before. And frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country, and maybe beyond. And now it's going to reach a new level of importance because we're going to help our country heal. We're going to help our country heal. We have a country that needs help, and it needs help very badly. We're going to fix our borders. We're going to fix everything about our country. And we made history for a reason tonight, and the reason is going to be just that. We overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible, and it is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy? But it's a political victory that our country has never seen before, nothing like this. I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
Meanwhile, his contender, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, is yet to make any comment. Co-chair of the campaign, Cedric Richmond, briefly addressed supporters at Howard University and said votes were still yet to be counted.
I want to say good evening to all of the Harris campaign, the campaign family. Thank you for all that you have done. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in the promise of America. We still have votes to count. We still have states that have not been called yet. We will continue overnight to fight to make sure that every vote is counted, that every voice has spoken. So you won't hear from the Vice President tonight, but you will hear from her tomorrow. She will be back here tomorrow to address not only the HU family, not only to address her supporters, but to address the nation. So thank you. We believe in you. May God bless you. May God keep you. And go HU and go Harris. Thank you all.
Well, all of that happened before it was game over. It's literally game over. 270 is the benchmark, and Donald Trump is already doing 277 with the call of Wisconsin, which was a major battleground state. Electoral College vote 10 there. But let's come back home to Nigeria. Senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Ebonoluwa Adegboruwa, believes the federal government only released the minors initially arrested for alleged treason during the End Bad Governance protest, in his words, to save face and avoid embarrassment. While speaking in our program, The Morning Brief, Mr. Adegboruwa maintains that the presidency was aware of the condition of the children and says they facilitated their release because they knew they will lose the case in court.
I don't think Nigerians should be, I want to use the word swayed by the so-called presidential intervention. I don't think that those children were arraigned without the knowledge of the presidency. So this is just political hypocrisy, if I can tell you, honestly. You recall that in August, the entire country was virtually aflame because the president and the government did not want Nigerians to protest. And these children were arrested since August. So it cannot be that the presidency was not aware that they were in custody from Kano, from Kaduna. And so I see somebody trying to take political advantage of a situation that he caused. You know, so I don't want to be swayed by the so-called presidential intervention to curry favor from the people of Nigeria. The responsibility of what happened lies straight at the desk of the president. So I don't think that it's his intervention that caused their release. It's the outrage. The president was trying to avoid embarrassment. The government was trying to avoid a situation whereby they will be defeated in court because the charges could not succeed. After all, there was no evidence. For you to charge somebody for treasonable felony or mutiny, the person must be planning to overthrow the government. There must be conspiracy, like people who are planning coup. Not children who are 13 years old, not children who are minors. And the law is clear, the Child Rights Act is clear that you couldn't charge those people with that kind of offense. So the government did what it did to save face, to save embarrassment. The charge was going to collapse, and it was going to collapse on the head of the government.
Now, before I get to the very conversation for the day that has to do with security, both locally and internationally, let's tell you that the Vice President, Kashim Shettima, has advised the 119 pardoned End Bad Governance protesters to take advantage of the president's gesture and become responsible citizens. Those were the words. He was speaking when he received the protesters in the State House.
Regardless, the president has used his position as a father of the nation to give these young men another chance at becoming responsible citizens who will make a positive impact in the drive for a better Nigeria. I would like to admonish you, young men, not to allow yourself to be used in perpetrating violence and destroying public and private property. Over 300 billion naira was lost in the protests, consisting mainly private property through looting and loss of business. I will urge you, I will advise you, you are our children, to use the opportunity of the President's magnanimous gesture in ensuring that you go back home and become responsible citizens who will contribute to the growth of the society.
All right, so let's get to the conversation. I'm being joined by the Managing Director of Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, Mr. Kabiru Adamu. He joins us via Zoom from the nation's capital, Abuja. Mr. Adamu, thank you so much for coming on the program.
My pleasure, Jeffrey. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm very well. So we're going to just touch on all the issues as much as time will permit us. But let's start from the home ground, the local scene, which is the very sad development concerning the death of Gen Lagbaja, the Chief of Army Staff, which was announced today by the presidency. And this comes just barely a day after his successor was decorated and elevated. I'm just seeing now that the president has actually postponed the Federal Executive Council meeting to a date to be announced. This is in honor of the late Lieutenant General Gen Lagbaja, who passed on last night, and also the nation's flags are to be flown at half-mast nationwide for 7 days in honor of the late general. So I needed your initial reaction to this development and what is playing out.
Well, it's to join Nigerians and your station in paying condolences to the family of the late Chief of Army Staff, and of course to the Army Corps, and of course the entire military establishment and the nation as a whole. It's quite commendable that the president has recognized this death and has also, taken some measures to recognize the sacrifice that this fine gentleman, this military officer, has given to the country in first canceling the Federal Executive Council meeting for today, and then stating that we'll fly our flag at half-mast for the next 7 days. These are gestures that are granted to persons who have excelled in their commitment, as it were, to the country. And so we commend the president in that regard, while condoling with the family of the deceased. No doubt, late General Tariq Lagbaja has left a mark within the Nigerian army, and of course within the military establishment, with his style of leadership, with the operational preparedness that he attempted to create within the Nigerian army, and in terms of the interoperability between the army, the Air Force, and the Navy. Those are things that would be remembered for a very long time after him.
You've mentioned them in passing, but let's now zoom in even further to highlight it as much as possible. We have a new man in charge who takes over from Lieutenant General Gen Lagbaja, who has also been elevated. So what exactly, in your view, from a security expert point of view, would you see him build on or improve upon, and even entirely correct to improve our security record? Because we still have issues. Recently, we had, let's call them what they are, terrorists vandalizing our national asset, our power installation. And even the government recognized that it wasn't a technical problem. It was actually these terrorists that destroyed this thing. And we're not even allowing workers to go and fix what they've destroyed. So what is the new chief going to be building on and correcting in going forward?
So in his statement yesterday, he indicated that he's going to build upon the legacy that was left by the late Tariq Lagbaja, which means he's likely going to continue along the line of what late Tariq Lagbaja did. In other words, improving on the operational preparedness, the equipment repository of the military, and of course the welfare of the army vis-a-vis the other units within the Nigerian military. Now, my worry is this, and this is not specific to the Nigerian army, but to the entire security sector. When discussing security, we should always remember that there are various MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies that play a role within that security space. If you are isolating them in their primary sense, you are talking of 29 of them. But if you are including others, like for instance, the role that the Ministry of Justice will play in security, we're talking of about 36 ministries, departments, and agencies. Now, the military is only 4 of that, and in this instance, the army is only 1. And so when you isolate just one agency in the army, and then you attempt to discuss its role, it's very important that you remember it's just contributing to one role within that space. And then it's also important to note that the Chief of Army Staff does not have coordinating functions within the entire security space. He, for instance, in an ideal environment, would be working with the Chief of Defense Staff, the Minister of Defense, and then probably with the National Security Advisor in certain elements of our national security imperative. So it is in this regard that I'll call on the new Chief of Army Staff to be very, very intentional about understanding the role of the Nigerian Army within this very vast space that I've attempted to describe, so that the contributions are measured, the contributions are intentional, and then they are kept within the remits of our Constitution. It is only that way that we can measure the performance and say he has done well or he hasn't done well. The attempt, for instance, to get involved in things outside the remit of the Army would make it extremely difficult for the Army to be measured in terms of its performances. And that's why I say it's not a responsibility only by the Army, but it's a responsibility that we as Nigerians have given the Army. And I think the onus is on him to correct that. Allow the civilian departments, such as the police, to occupy the civic space, and then let him focus on the core responsibilities of the Army in terms of especially clearing the immediate threat, then allowing the police and the others to take over. In military parlance, they call it take, hold, and rebuild. He should take, hand over to the police to hold, and then allow the other elements to rebuild. I think if he does that, we'll look back and probably commend him and praise him. But all right, I've talked about the...
No, go ahead. Land on your thoughts, please.
I was going to say the issues around welfare, around corruption within the Army, around operational capabilities. Those are things that he has already indicated he's going to build on. So I didn't bother to speak too much about them. I just kind of looked at the strategic, objective of what his leadership could mean to the country.
Okay, so I know that let's do a bit of digging further deep into this particular analytics of expectation, because we can't keep it open-ended, but you have mentioned it in passing. Some level of KPI for this particular chief for as long as he's in the office, especially that has to do with insulating our military from political interference. Sadly to say, when the end bad governance came, we listened carefully to the security agencies and some of the rhetorics that came from them, and we're like, okay, excuse me, you're supposed to be the army, you're supposed to be the police. As much as you're doing your job, your communication you're supposed to be in a position where you just speak purely on your professional, representation, not delving into nuances that could be interpreted to be political patronage. We've seen it happen. I don't want to make any exact comment on it, but I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. How do we insulate them from political interference and bring back the level of discipline we expect of our military officers as we set a KPI for Lieutenant General Oluyede?
Well, I would have to commend the current crop of the service chiefs, starting from the Chief of Defense Staff to the other three, including the late Lagbaja, in terms of the commitment that they made to professionalism and reducing the political interference. Now, so in most instances, the political interference is not from within the military hierarchy. It's usually from the politicians who would want to achieve certain political objectives. And so the difficulty is where, for instance, an appointment is made on the basis of considerations that are either sentimental in certain instances, then the person who is benefiting from that appointment, it's going to be extremely difficult for him not to dance to the political, manipulations, as it were. But having said that, I would urge the new Chief of Army Staff to remember that he's leading an establishment, one of the most respected institutions or establishments within the country, and that whatever he does would have a significant impact on that institution and establishment. And so where possible, he needs to be bold and to look the politicians in the eye and remind them that the interest of the nation should always come before personal or political interest, as the case may be. It's going to be a very difficult thing to do, but we have to urge him and we have to support him. And I think with the crop of service chiefs that are there, especially the Chief of Defense Staff, this would be extremely easy for him to do. I must also say that the Minister of Defense, especially the Honorable Minister of Defense, is one who has shown commitment to professionalism. And so probably that level of interference will not come from there. The component of interference is probably going to come from other sources. And so he needs to make a very strong stance towards professionalism. And I'm sure Nigerians will support him in that regard.
All right, so let's get outside our shows. I say we'll talk about two things. Let's talk about geopolitics. Now, everybody is, we now know he's going to be the next president of the United States. 47th President Donald Trump has emerged after winning 277 electoral college votes, with Wisconsin being called 10 votes added to 267 he had before now. It's game over for Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party. And Donald Trump is back in the White House. When you see this result and you see what has played out, from a security point of view, because we have to be looking at the issues around the world, the issue of Israel and Gaza, Israel in Lebanon, Russia-Ukraine war, which Donald Trump said if he was president, Putin wouldn't try what he did. So just give us your overview of what we are looking at here.
Trump is who he is. The Republican establishment is also well recognized in terms of its foreign policy objectives. And so looking back at what he did when he was the 45th president of the United States of America, we're likely to see a continuation of his isolationist policies, America first, and then, unfortunately, an erratic foreign policy. His entire 45th presidency was, that was what we saw. In terms of specifics, we're not sure what he's going to do in the Middle East. His attempts during his 45th president to bolster some elements of Israeli dominance within the region, including the creation of the capital in Jerusalem, that didn't work out very well. Now that there is an all-out war, and of course the US is supporting that war with both in terms of funds and weaponry, it's likely that Trump is going to continue along that line. I think my greatest worry is what he's going to do with Iran. It is well, speculated. There was a lot of chatter under his when he was the 45th president that he had plans of attacking Iran, and if that happens, we could see an all-out war in the Middle East. How that is going to play out, nobody really knows. So again, it's likely to be a very erratic period. Of course, his stance on climate change is well known. That could also have an impact globally. It could also, of course, have a huge impact on Africa. We're already seeing that impact. I don't expect to see any major changes in terms of the foreign policy imperatives in Africa, given what he did as the 45th president and given the current dynamics, especially the coup in the three regions neighboring Nigeria. Perhaps we could see some stance where he strengthens America's relationship with some countries in Africa. But in terms of any serious changes to foreign policy, I don't expect that. So again, I want to emphasize it's the isolationism that we saw, and the erratic foreign policy is likely to continue.
As we were talking, I'm trying to remember whether Trump ever stopped by Africa in any African country. Maybe you know, but I don't think I can remember whether he visited any African country in the 4 years he was president. I can't remember. So are you saying in essence that we are walked into an uncertainty, we just have to brace up for whatever comes through as far as the Trump presidency is concerned? Because it concerns all of us at the end of the day.
So there are known knowns and there are known unknowns. The known knowns is that the foreign policy on Africa is not likely to change. We're also likely to see a continuation of U.S. support to Israel, as it were. The unknown known is what would happen in Iran. Would he support an all-out attack on Iran, unlike what Biden did, measuring and reducing an all-out campaign against Iran, as it were. And then, of course, the relationship with China. I don't think there will be any significant changes in that regard. And a few other known unknowns. But I've talked about the climate change stance. I've also talked about the issue in the Middle East and the African policy. All of these are things that we know. What we don't know, for instance, is whether, because this is his second term and the last term, whether he would be adventurous and take certain risk. This is what worries a lot of us. The erratic responses to certain foreign policy development. The position and where the world is at the moment doesn't need that, unfortunately.
I want to thank you so much. We don't have time to go to the issue of immigration. You mentioned Iran, where we've not even mentioned North Korea and some other places where we're looking very closely at some of his responses and what he has to do with Putin and in Russia and Ukraine war. Because he said, "I just want people to stop dying." Those were his words. I don't want people dying. Whether he has to, I don't know how he wants to stop that war, but it would be great to see the war come to an end. MD Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, Mr. Kabir Adamu, who is also a security consultant. Thank you so much for your intervention, for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me, Jeffrey.
And just before we go, let's tell you that the federal government has reversed the decision to benchmark the admission age of tertiary institutions at 18 years. The newly appointed Minister of Education, Dr. Tunji Olaosa, announced the decision during his maiden news conference in Abuja. Apart from the Education Minister, the Minister of Labor and Employment, as well as Ministers of Humanitarian Affairs, also assumed office. And that's it on the program. Thank you so much for your time and, of course, your usual company. So like we say, we have to brace up for the Trump presidency, 47th president of the United States, with the numbers coming in from the states. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma. You've been served on Lunchtime Politics.